I am Reed. I am 27, just an average dude. I've made tons of money mistakes in my 20s, and now I want to share everything I've learned to help you take control of your finances and your life. So, oh shit, something just broke in the bond market. And most people, honestly, they not even paying attention. Let me explain this. In a way that makes sense to us, regular people, the 30-year Treasury yield just shot past 5%. 5%, man, that's the first time it's done that since 2007. Right before the great financial crisis hit and everything went sideways. And I know a lot of you are probably thinking, what the hell is a Treasury and why should I care about some yield? Trust me, I get it. A few years ago, I was exactly there, clueless. But this stuff, what's happening right now, it has a direct impact on our economy, on the stock market, and yeah, even on your paycheck. Seriously, most people have no idea what a treasury is, let alone how it actually impacts the broader economy. And that's why, in this video, even if you don't know what a treasury is, I am going to break down what's going on, but more importantly, what might be coming. That way, not only can you protect your money, but you can also find the opportunity. Because this change, as scary as it sounds, can actually create opportunities for you to grow your wealth even faster. So, let me break it all down. Imagine for a second. Okay, just play along with me here that you've got a $500,000 mortgage. And let us say, just for kicks, you got an awesome 2% interest rate. So your monthly payments to your bank are, around $1,850 a month. That's pretty sweet, right? Well, one day your bank calls you up out of the blue and they say, hey, we need to readjust your mortgage. You're no longer going to be paying this 2%. Now we're going to charge you 5%. And just like that, overnight, your mortgage payments go from $1,850 a month all the way up to about $2,700 a month. Seriously, that seems a little crazy, right? Who does that? Well, this is exactly what's happening to the United States government right now in the Treasury market. It's pretty wild when you think about it. The way the United States government works is they go out and they collect tax dollars from people like you and me. That's how they get their money, right? And then the government will go out and spend this money in our economy. They spend this money on things like Social Security, Medicare, our military, and then, the infrastructure for the country, all that stuff. The problem is, and this isn't some new thing, this has been going on for decades. The government spends way more money than what they generate from taxes. It's like me back in my early 20s, always spending more than I made. Not a good look, trust me. So to make up for all of this additional spending, the government has to go out and borrow this money. They do it in the form of debt. Now, here's where things get interesting, especially when we look back at the 2020 pandemic. It's becoming pretty apparent that the government made a big mistake in the way that they were borrowing money. When the United States government borrows money, this is called a treasury, and you can actually lend money to the United States government yourself. And in exchange for lending money to the government, they're going to pay you back your money plus interest over a period of time. It's basically like a super safe loan you give the government. Now, sometimes these loans that the government will issue are short-term loans. Things like a few weeks long, 1 year long, 2 year long, 5 year long. Sometimes they longer. Term loans, like 10-year loans or 30-year loans, well, this is where the government made a very costly decision, a real head-scratcher looking back. But to really understand what they did, let us ignore the government for a second and go back to you buying a house. If you go out and get a mortgage for a house, generally you're going to get a much lower interest rate mortgage when you get a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage. Why? Because with a 15-year mortgage, the bank gets their money back faster, so they charge you a lower rate of interest because it's less risk for them. Makes sense, right? Well, it works the same with treasuries. When the government borrows money for 1 year, they're going to pay a lower rate of interest than when they borrow that money for 30 years. It's just how it works. So let us go back in time, back to the year 2020 and 2021. Remember, that was when we had the lowest interest rates in the history of time. Seriously, it was insane how low they were. And now the United States government was deciding what type of loans they wanted to issue, short-term loans or long-term loans, and this is what their options were, by the way. I do want to mention that because of all these changes happening with the government and the changes in our economy and the changes with AI and technology, I am hosting a live free and virtual investor workshop on the 16th of June at 12 p.m. noon Eastern Time. This is going to be a free workshop where I go over not just how you can get started as an investor and find better investment opportunities, but also my firm's research as to where we're seeing some of the biggest opportunities right now, because money is moving fast, and the people that can get ahead of this will be able to grow their wealth even faster. So if you're an investor or want to be an investor and you want to see how you can capitalize on the changing economy, how you can capitalize on what's happening with the government, how you can capitalize on what's going on with changes with AI and technology, I invite you to join me on this live free and virtual investor workshop on the 16th of June. Again, at S Live, I am doing it at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you like to join me, all you have to do is register, and I have the link for you down in the description below. And when you register for the workshop, you're also going to get access to market briefs, which is my newsletter for investors completely free. So if you have not signed up for my workshop yet, again, I have that link for you down in the description. So It's the year 2020 and 2021, and the United States government is borrowing more money than ever before. Part of the reason why the government is borrowing so much money is because they're refunding stimulus checks. They refunding unemployment checks, they refunding these PPP loans, they rebailing out businesses. I mean, the government is borrowing more amount of money than really most people can imagine. It was a crazy time, and this is where the government had to make a decision. Did they want to lock in a 30-year fixed rate loan, meaning the government would be paying out this amount of interest rate for the next 30 years, locked in at something like around 2% a year? Now, I am estimating here because the interest rates did change between 2020 and 2021, but around 2% a year. Or did the government want to get a little bit more aggressive? They could lock in a 10-year fixed rate loan for something like 1.5% a year, which also was some of the lowest 10-year loans in the history of time. So the government could save some money by getting a 10-year loan, but it's not going to be locked in for 30 years. LA'll only be locked in for about 10 years. Or did they want to get even more aggressive and maybe get a 5-year loan or a shorter term loan and now only pay something like a 1% interest rate? But it's not going to be locked in for 10 years or 30 years. LL only be locked in for about 5 years, kind of like an adjustable rate mortgage, where now your mortgage rate is not locked in for 30 years. This was the dilemma that the government was facing back in the year 2020 and 2021, and during the time when interest rates were so low, the government was borrowing money like crazy to fund PPP loans and unemployment checks and stimulus checks and everything in between, and the government said, you know what, instead of locking it in for 30 years at 2% a year, how about we just do these 5-year loans? We're going to do more of these 5-year loans at this very cheap interest rate because we LL get to save more money on our interest payments today. It felt like a good idea at the time, probably. Well, here we are now, 5 years later, and now this government debt is starting to readjust at a much higher interest rate, man. For those of you that were watching my videos in 2020 and 2021, we were talking about what would happen once the government debt starts to readjust in the coming years. Well, here we are today, and now many people are starting to call it the biggest blunder in the history of the United States Treasury. We had the ability to lock in our interest rates for decades at some of the lowest interest rates in the history of time. Instead, we decided to do these short-term loans to make the most money in the short term, having this really short-sighted mindset. And now, well, things are about to change in 2024. About $7 trillion of government debt readjusted at higher interest rates. Think about that, $7 trillion in 2025. It was about $9.2 trillion that readjusted from this era to the higher interest rates in 2025. And now in 2026, it's estimated that about $9.7 trillion is going to readjust at the higher interest rates today. That's a massive amount of money. Well, the real issue in 2026 that wasn't there in 2025 or 2024 is that the interest rates that the government has to pay today are even higher than where we were last year. It just keeps climbing. I know I keep going back to the housing market example, but it's a good one because it's something we can relate to. The people that were buying houses in the early and mid 2000s, they also didn't know what was going to happen to interest rates. So your mortgage banker said, hey, interest rates are probably going to come down, and when they come down, you can just refinance your mortgage at a lower rate and things will be fine, and you LL be able to save money on your mortgage. Well, that didn't happen, did it? Mortgage rates went up, not down, and that's what caused the housing market to collapse come 2008. Well, here we are today in 2026 and leading up to 2026. Everybody kept thinking that interest rates are going to fall, that the Federal Reserve Bank is going to cut interest rates aggressively. But then a lot of things changed in the economy. Oil prices skyrocketed. We entered a new war in the Middle East, and now interest rates are the highest that we have seen since 2007. Right before the housing market collapsed in 2008, it's like deja vu, but with government debt instead of mortgages. The other part of the problem is that the previous people that would lend money to the United States government aren't lending money to the United States government the way that they did before. This is a big deal. For example, China is one of the largest owners of United States debt, or at least they used to be, and they have turned from a net buyer of United States debt now to a seller of United States debt. They redumping it, man. We also have many other countries around the world that aren't buying as much United States debt because now they want to buy gold. They re-worried about the United States dollar. They re-worried about inflation. So the way that the United States government can borrow this money is starting to change. And if the government cannot borrow this money from people like you and me, they can borrow this money from foreign countries like China and Japan and the United Kingdom. Then the third option is the United States government will either have to find an alternative solution. I'll talk more about that in the coming days because that's a whole other can of worms. Something to do with crypto, but we save that for later. Or the United States government is going to have to work to get that money printed through the Federal Reserve Bank. Remember, the Federal Reserve Bank is the central bank here in the United States, but they not a bank because you and I can go there to deposit money. They not a reserve because they not sitting on any cash reserves. And they not federal, it literally says so on their website, but they have the ability to print money and lend it to the United States government. So if the government keeps spending money that they don't have, which looks like it's going to continue happening, and they have to continue refinancing their debt. They're going to continue needing more lenders. They're going to continue needing more buyers of this debt. And if there's not the same demand as before, that's where the Federal Reserve Bank has to step up. They have to print the money and then lend it to the United States government. The problem with that money printing is, of course, money printing comes with more inflation, because you can print more wealth. You can print more dollars, though. And as you print more dollars, the value of each dollar starts to go down, causing the prices of things to go up. Think about it, your money just buys less. Now, couple that with the higher oil prices, couple that with already the high inflation that we're seeing today in 2026, and you can start to see the problem. It's a messy situation. But there's one more part to this that you really want to pay attention to, because it's going to hit home. Do you want to know what the fastest growing expense for the United States government is? Seriously, guess. It's not our military, it's not Medicare or Medicaid, and it's not Social Security. It's interest payments on all of our debt, just paying the interest. Why are interest payments skyrocketing? Well, 2 reasons. Number 1, the government keeps spending trillions of dollars that we don't have, so we keep increasing how much debt we have to have. And number 2, because as we refinance this debt, as our debt comes due, this debt is now being readjusted from these lower interest rates to now some of the highest Treasury rates that we have seen in about 2 decades. Now let me explain why that matters, because right now, at the time we re-recording this video, already every time you give $1 to the United States government in taxes, 20% of that, about 20 cents of that dollar, is going just to pay interest on the previous debt. It's not going to pay for your health insurance. It's not going to pay for any infrastructure. It's not going to actually provide value for you. It's just going to pay off the previous debt. That's insane. As interest costs start to go up even more, that puts more financial strain on the United States government. That means more and more of our tax dollars have to be used not to actually provide value to its citizens, but to be used to pay back the previous debt plus interest. That's the problem that the government is facing. We keep spending money that we don't have, and now we also have higher debt costs. And as our debt costs also go up, now the government gets into a tougher situation. Are we going to raise taxes? Which it doesn't look like we were going to do, because President Trump just signed the biggest tax cut bill that we've seen in the last 300 years. So taxes probably aren't going up. Are we going to cut spending? Well, people don't like the idea of cutting spending on Social Security, or cutting spending on Medicare, or cutting spending on our military. Nobody wants their benefits cut. So if we're not going to cut spending and we're not going to raise taxes, what is the alternative? Well, we can print that money. But now we have an inflation problem. And this is where a lot of people don't understand how this inflation works. But the inflation makes the average person poorer while the investor becomes richer. That's why you have to understand how this system works, because this is happening right now, and most people don't know the implications of these higher interest rates. But these higher interest rates have a direct impact on our economy. They have a direct impact on the stock market, but they also have a direct impact on your paycheck, because it changes the value of your paycheck. As inflation happens, your paycheck buys you less stuff. Your savings buy you less stuff. It's like watching your money shrink. And that's why it's so important for you to understand this. Because most people don't start paying attention until after the fact, after they start feeling the impacts of this on their wallet, after they start seeing the impact of this on the stock market, after they start seeing the impact in the job market and the economy. Well, this is where I want you to get a little bit more proactive and understand that, hey, there are changes happening. I'm not saying be worried about a recession or a market crash. Those things are always on the horizon. It doesn't matter when we're talking.